The semifinals of the FCS playoffs are here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to SlasherU. I'm your host, Christian Rao, here with my co-host, Steve Feck. We are going to break down the semifinals. The Final Four, they are here. And if we talked about the four that were going to make it, I don't think it would be this exactly on my list, Steve. We got Incarnate Word, North Dakota State, Montana State, and South Dakota State. Now, some of them sound familiar, but I think there's a few sleepers in the mix as well. Before we dig into these games, pretty nice lineup we have for the Final Four remaining.
Yeah, I think, Incarnate Word, just on their fourth quarter alone last week, they deserve to be in the semifinals. And it's just as far as this program has come. So it's a big achievement for them. They're just coming off, losing a head coach and a quarterback, and to bounce back the way they have this year and play as well as they did, it's terrific. But you've got North Dakota State, basically the old Green Bay Packers of the FCS, just grinded out on the ground. 10 of the last 12 years they've won the title. South Dakota State's been number one since they beat North Dakota State, and I'm sporting the team of the hour, Montana State Bobcats. I don't know that there's any team playing as well as they are, and I'm including FBS teams right now. They are just clicking on every possible cylinder. So.
Wow, gotta love that. All right, strong words to start this one off. Fantastic. We'll get to Montana State here in just a minute, but first I want to break down the game. We have one game on Friday night, one game Saturday afternoon, so plenty of time for you to get your FCS fix in this weekend. The winners head on to the FCS Championship on January 8th. That'll be at 2 o'clock on ABC. We'll have a preview and a recap covering that one as well coming up after in 2023. We're already looking that far ahead because it's just a few weeks ahead now. We are getting into the end of this year. 2022 was a wild one, but let's dig in to this game on Friday night. Incarnate Word taking on North Dakota State. North Dakota State does start off as a 9.5-point favorite. 11-2 North Dakota State taking on 12-1 Incarnate Word. Now, Incarnate Word, just like you said, I think they've been probably the most surprising team to make it into the Final Four, if you will, into the semifinals. They had arguably the most entertaining game. I think you could make the argument that it was in all of college football last week against Sacramento State, 66-63 final. And I'm not even giving it justice because of just the amount of points happened in the fourth quarter alone was insane, Steve. But this team really, they have some strong momentum heading into this game against North Dakota State, and so does North Dakota State as well. They put a hurt on Samford, 27-9.
Yeah, Incarnate Word put on a highlight reel just in the fourth quarter. 52 points, both teams combined. But Lindsey Scott Jr., their quarterback, boy, the more I see him, the more I understand why the supporters and the coaching staff weren't that bummed to lose Cameron Ward to Washington State. This kid is terrific. And the two receivers, Grimes and Chafin, man, they can catch the ball. Whether they have to jump for it, whether they're diving for it, whether it's put right in their hands, they don't drop balls. Certainly not balls that going to lead to scores. So Incarnate Word, what a terrific year. San Antonio is suddenly becoming the college football capital of the country. Our beloved UTSA Roadrunners, you got Incarnate Word, you have Trinity, which had been undefeated up until recently. So I just don't know that Incarnate Word has an answer for North Dakota State's running game. And I don't think that there's a running game that is as bruising as North Dakota State's. And when we talk about Montana State, I think they may have the best running game of the four teams left. But North Dakota State, it is just pounded pounded down, black and blue football. And North Dakota State, they've been here. This is just sort of like, well, of course we're in the national semifinals. But when they lost to South Dakota State in October, I think a lot of people, and even in the back of my mind, I was wondering, okay, is this magical run over? You knew they were going to make the playoffs. Even if they weren't a seed, they were going to make it as a large bid. But North Dakota State kind of shrugged it up and said, okay, fine, we lost. And they just kept winning after that. Defensively, they have a really special defensive end in Spencer Wade. He runs down the quarterback. He runs down running backs. I mean, I've seen him drop back in pass coverage, not a lot, but I've seen him drop back, maybe cover the tight end. That kid is special. They're only allowing 17.3 points a game. So, yes, Incarnate Word is averaging 53 a game, 53 and change a game. They're not going to sniff 30 Incarnate Word. I'm not saying that Incarnate Word has no chance, but they're not going to have a game like they put up against Sacramento State. I mean, they're just not. North Dakota State defense is that special. I got to go with the Bisons in this one. I mean, I see the Bisons, going to the FCS championship game on the 8th of January. Playoff football, especially in the FCS, but you can say the same thing for FBS and the NFL. It's run the ball, make the big stops, and that is North Dakota State in a brief sentence. That's how good they are. They're one of the most well-coached teams in the FCS. Incarnate Words had a great run. And honestly, if you have not seen even highlights of last week's game against Sacramento State, people, you need to go back on YouTube. I mean, it was just, I was watching it and I honestly couldn't believe what I was watching. I mean, it was special. But I mean, I'm going North Dakota State. I'm giving the points here. I know it's almost double-digit points. It's not a knock on Incarnate Word. North Dakota State's defense is that special. And they also control, the line of scrimmage on the offensive side. So I'm going with North Dakota State on this one.
Yeah, I mean, all very good points. The fact that you think that they won't get touched 30 is very interesting because the lowest Incarnate Word has scored all season long was week 3 against Prairie View, where they scored 31. And that's the lowest they've scored all season long. In the playoffs, they scored 41 and they've scored 66. Each of those games, they've only won by a field goal. That's the interesting concept behind them. If I had to make an argument based on for Incarnate Word against North Dakota State, you said the running game for North Dakota State, is immaculate. I agree with that. However, Sacramento State had a fantastic day on the ground last week, and they still found a way to win. Both teams had over 330 yards on the ground last week in that 66-63 final. Now, it could just come down to that again. I mean, if I'm a betting man, I would be taking Incarnate Word with the points here because the last 2 weeks we saw them win by a field goal. So they found a way to keep it close, and we know that they know how to score points. I'm not touching this one when it comes to points on this one, though, because North Dakota State could make this one farther away, that we have seen the strength of this team move forward. But I wouldn't be surprised if Scott and company keep this one close and find a way to have another Cinderella upset, as we've seen so far with this team in the playoffs. They had a really tight win against Furman with that 41-38 win. And then what we saw last week was just magical. I mean, I don't think there's a better word than magical. It was really entertaining in itself. And then who says that's the stop, right? We've seen some crazier things happen in playoff type of games when it comes to all across sports, but especially in football. Who says stop in this one? Incarnate Words had a magical season, and I don't know if it's going to stop in this one. I am going to agree with you. I'm going to take North Dakota State to win this football game. However, I don't think it's going to be by 9.5 points. So against by 10 points or more. If I'm playing this one, I would play Incarnate Word with the points because I think it's going to be close. I think that if anything, they lose by maybe a field goal. They keep it close. And just the fact, as long as Scott stays healthy and plays every snap for them at quarterback, they're going to be just fine. He was responsible for 6 touchdowns, 4 in the air, 2 on the ground last week. He is a special player. I mean, one more touchdown through the air. He's got 60 touchdowns on the year. That's just absolutely incredible. So count me in to count this one as being probably a very good game. I will be paying very close attention to this one on Friday night. And I wouldn't be surprised if we have another highlight reel that is just as long as the game itself, probably an hour's worth of highlights out of this game, Steve.
Yeah, this is the last week's game against Sacramento State in that fourth quarter. That was the game that made me miss John Facenda, that legendary voice of NFL films, the most I have in since his passing. I mean, honestly, that was the kind of game. And when you hear a score of 66-63, you're like, oh, there's turnovers and there's interceptions and there's this and that. It was just run and gun football. Somewhere up in the sky right now, Mike Leach is watching film of last week's game, and he is smiling from ear to ear as he plucks that harp. And R.I.P. and our best wishes to Mike Leach and his family and the Mississippi State football family. That's a big loss. That's a big loss to overcome. But that's the kind of football that Mike Leach invented in a lot of ways at the college level. Yes, absolutely. I mean, you saw it in the pros with Eric Coryell and stuff like that. But Mike Leach, what an innovator! But you know that he's going to be rooting on that they don't angels in the outfield. It's going to be angels on the gridiron. Mike Leach is going to try to pull those strings to try to get a team like Incarnate Word to the FCS championship.
Hey, I like it too. Yeah, college football will never be the same because of what we lost this just past week. So, and I agree with you. So, thanks for bringing that up. All right, let's move into the second game of the weekend here. And this one, I think, is just going to be just as good. I know you got rocking the hat of Montana State. Well, they're taking on South Dakota State, who has been the heavy favorites all season long into this playoffs. They were the number one seed for a reason. 12-1 Montana State versus 11-1 South Dakota State. The Jackrabbits are a 5.5-point favorite. This game's going to be on Saturday, 4 o'clock Eastern Time, ESPN2, ESPN Plus, and NCAA.com. I think this game is going to be, both these games, I think, are going to be wild. I think they're going to be really good games to watch. I don't think you need to miss a single second of either of these games. What was surprising to me was the absolute beating that Montana State did against William & Mary, because the week before, William & Mary put an absolute hurt on their opponent, and which was, to me, just insane. They put a hurt on Gardner Webb, and then they get completely blown out by Montana State. Ever since College Game Day came to Montana State against the Montana game, that was a big rivalry at the end of the season. I feel like Montana State has turned on to a whole new gear. They have been just completely on it. And this, to me, seems like we probably should have got this game next week in the championship game, because we might be getting a preview of the possibility of the two best teams remaining this week in this game right here. I think I think the winner of this game has a very strong chance of winning the whole thing come January 8th.
Well, I agree, and I do think, and it happens at all levels of college football, but especially at the FCS level, there is a reverence for the defending champion. So if they are in the mix for a seed, they're going to get the nod. And if it's close, and the committee's sort of like, well, I don't know, is it Montana State? Is it North Dakota State? North Dakota State's going to get that higher seed. But you're right. I mean, basically, these are the two best teams left in the FCS playoffs by far, bar none. South Dakota State, this is sort of like a revenge game for South Dakota State too, because back in 2021, these two teams played in Bozeman. And Montana State won by, I believe it was by 14 points, by 2 touchdowns, I'm pretty sure. But again, Montana State was the higher seed back then, too. South Dakota State has a top 5 FCS defense. That's how they beat North Dakota State. That's how they beat everybody, in the Valley. They rely very heavily on the run game, especially, I mean, they've got a special back in Isaiah Davis. So South Dakota State's not going to just roll over or be intimidated, even when I start gushing about the Bobcats here in just a minute or so. They only allow, 70.6 yards a game on the ground.
Yeah.
In the FCS, that's unheard of. It's unheard of in the FBS, but I mean, in the FCS, there are a lot of teams, and they don't all run the triple option, or a variation of the wishbone or anything. I mean, they just run the ball well, at the FCS level. So San Diego State is going to have an answer potentially from Montana State.
It's going to be a good one. South Dakota State had a little bit of a scare last week against Holy Cross. If you would have caught that game at the beginning of it, or really into the first half, you would have saw this game was tied. Actually, going into the fourth quarter, this game was tied at 21. Then South Dakota State turned it on at the end of the game in the fourth quarter, scored 21 unanswered to win it 42-21. But this game was completely different before that last 15 minutes of the game. If they want a chance to continue and be the favorite and move into the championship game and beat Montana State, they can't just be a fourth quarter team like they were last week. They have to turn it on and play very hard to beat this one. So I'm guessing that you're taking Montana State to get the upset on this one.
Well, see, in my mind, it's not an upset. They are the best team in the FCS right now. And that phrase right now is very important in any playoff. It doesn't matter whether it's the Little League playoffs or Pop Warner playoffs or high school playoffs. If you're the best team at that moment, going through that playoff bracket, that's what matters. It doesn't matter what happened in the regular season. That's already in the history books. What matters is what they're doing now. And Montana State, by far, you talked about College Game Day. Yeah. It was a crescendo. It kept growing and growing to that game. They embarrassed their cross state. It was a blowout. They embarrassed Montana. And Montana is a proud program. They're well coached. I know you were really high on Montana all year. I mean, as was I. Montana, they had some tough losses, but they embarrassed them on national television. They run for 334 yards a game, and they don't do any tricks. It's not the triple option or whatever it would be, and it's really unique with Montana State. They have a dual quarterback system. And when you see that, especially at the college level, generally one quarterback is the running quarterback and one quarterback is the throwing quarterback. Touchdown Tommy Mellott and Sean Chambers, they do both equally well. I mean, it's not like, Sean Chambers can't gain yards on the ground. He has a little bit of, I think, of a more accurate throwing arm than Tommy Mellott. And Tommy Mellott, if he has to make a big pass, he's proven all through the season that he can do that.
Yep.
But the big difference for Montana State is Isaiah Afonso, who basically has been out since before that 2021 matchup against South Dakota State. He had serious knee injury. He didn't even play his first game of the year until the second round of the playoffs, or Montana State's first game. So he's only 2 games in. He ran for 162 yards, 2 touchdowns. Both touchdowns were explosive, just blowing off tackle and then just running, even with that serious knee injury and the big, cumbersome brace. He just blew past people. He is that final piece. We talk about that in baseball, for example, at the trading deadline. You're looking for that last piece, that extra bullpen arm or that extra bench bat. Afonso is a star, and because of injury, it's just taking him this long to get back. So as much as I've enjoyed the Jackrabbits all year, okay, I think that their season is they're going to be chasing their season down the Jackrabbit hole, if you pardon the pun, nice. Because I have a lot of time on my hand, Christian, so I can come up with this stuff. But really, I mean, Montana State, it's not just because I have the hat. And no, they didn't send it to me, South Dakota State fans. I actually bought it, okay? Because that's how impressed I was with Montana State even before the College Game Day. Mm-hmm. So this is a team of destiny. It's just one of those teams. If you want to call them a wild card, they were the number 4 seed. Personally, I think they could have been 3. And quite honestly, you talk about Holy Cross. Holy Cross really should have been the 4 seed. But again, that's right. It's in the past. It's in the past. Montana State is going to just wear down South Dakota State, and they're going to beat South Dakota State at their own game, both defensively and with the run game. They're going to beat South Dakota State at their own game, and that's going to match up a pretty interesting matchup. The big Goliath, the dominant force in FCS for the last 12 years, North Dakota State, and a Montana State that's showing and proving some of the skeptics. And there were skeptics earlier in the year. Wait, why are you
sure?
Why are you doing 2 quarterbacks? You can't decide, is it one good enough or not? Can you really keep running the ball this way? They had not even including Afonso. They had 4 guys run for at least 400 yards on the roster. So there's running backs that you're going to see come in the game that already have had big games or whatever. So this is Montana State's time. This is Montana State's game. And I think you're going to see them in the FCS championship.
Well, we will have our answer to who makes it to the FCF championship on January 8th by Saturday night. It will be Incarnate Word, will be North Dakota State, will be Montana State or South Dakota State. It's really 2 of those teams will punch their ticket. Let us know your thoughts in the comment description below. Hit like and subscribe while you're there. And thanks for listening to Slasher U.